Good morning, everyone. My name is Carl Johnson from Cleared Systems, and this webinar is on how to become a defense manufacturer. In this webinar, we are going to talk about some of the key steps and guidelines that are important if you are deciding you want to become a defense manufacturer. Our agenda: talk about the paths to becoming a defense manufacturer, talk about some of the marketing research in a business plan, look at compliance and certification, discuss supply chain management, quality assurance, bidding and contract acquisition, considerations that need to be made for foreign employees, and along with facility locations, and then we'll end with a conclusion. If you are logged into WebEx, you can type in any of the questions you have into the chat. Our facilitators will either answer your question, or after the webinar is over, I'll make sure I answer the question for you. Also, at the end of this webinar, I will put up our contact information. You can send your questions in there as well, and I will answer them. So about us at Cleared Systems, we work with aerospace companies, we work with manufacturers, we work with DIB contractors, all helping to navigate through federal and DoD compliance, specifically around ITAR, DFARS, CMMC, NIST, like 800-171, CUI, anything related to DoD or federal contracting or federal compliance. From a security and a compliance perspective, we assist companies with. So if you have any questions whatsoever or need assistance, please contact us and we will most definitely assist you any way we can. So let's talk about the two paths, the paths that we see time and time again. The first path, which is I think where most manufacturers fall under, as of today, you are working as a manufacturer from a commercial perspective. In other words, your customers may be Walmart, it may be trucking companies, etc. You're doing some business, but at a commercial perspective. So from where we are today, a lot of the compliance concerns, it really hasn't come up yet, right? Now, you get a phone call from a prime contractor, the Boeings, the Lockheed Martins, Raytheon, and they say to you, we would like you to create or print out or design, whatever it may be, a widget for us. They are going to send you the files or they're going to send you the materials, and they want you to go ahead and do what you do best, which is the manufacturing side, and then send the finished product directly to them, right? So like looking at this slide, 90% of your business is on the commercial end, but now you have that small part of business that is now 10%, right? So now you are technically a defense contractor, right? Now, what comes with being a defense contractor is now there's a lot of compliance and security that has to now be considered. Whereas before, when you were only a commercial contractor, you may not even have to think about it. The second way, or the second path, is that part of your business plan, you have decided that you want to become a manufacturer that wants to do 100% business with the federal government, the DoD, your primes, like again, your Lockheed Martin, your Boeing, etc. That's your business plan. You don't have a plan to do business on a commercial end. Your plan is strictly going to be with the Department of Defense, prime contract, defense contractors, etc. Those are the two most common ways. And of course, there might be a third, right? You might have decided, you know what, maybe we want to do 90% of our business with the government and 10% of our business commercial. Whatever the percentages is, either way, if you are doing any business with the Department of Defense or prime contractors, how you look at things from a compliance and a security perspective, it has now changed. So, for example, this might be you over on the left-hand side, that you are now considered a subprime contractor, right? You're a defense contractor. The prime, which is the Boeings, the BAE, the Raytheons, etc., they reach out to you and they say, hey, we would like you to do business with us because we have a widget that we would like you to create for us. You, on your side, you may not know what the end product is, right? Obviously, these products might be for tanks, UAVs, weapon systems, etc. From your perspective, that's not really a concern for you. You're just creating one small widget that may go to a bigger piece of the puzzle. From there, that prime takes the end product and is going to sell it to their customer, which is the Department of Defense, might be a civilian agency, might be a defense agency. Either way, their end product is the government, the U.S. government. Another way of looking at it is that instead of you being a subprime contractor, you might be teaming up with the Boeings, the BAEs, the Raytheons, etc., and saying, hey, we want to work with you in creating the end product for the government. In this case, you have full exposure into what the end product is going to be. Maybe you have brought the RFP to the Raytheon, the Boeings, the primes of the world, and say, hey, we would like to work on this together with you. That's when both of your teams come together during the whole procurement and the acquisition process and creating the end product for your customer, which again is the Department of Defense or the federal government. This way, it takes a lot more resources and obviously a lot more time and more strategy, especially in marketing and planning and business development. The first way is, I would say, is more common, right? As I mentioned, you don't necessarily know what the end product is. You may have an idea, or maybe you do know, depending on the type of contract you have. But you're really just working as a subprime contractor for the prime, right? So you're delivering the widget to the prime. The prime is delivering the end product to their customer, which could be the Department of Defense. So before you go down either path, whether you've decided that you want to become a manufacturer that is 100% dedicated to the DoD and the federal government, or if you want to go down the path where you're a subprime contractor for a prime or many primes, either way, you have to consider a few things. And I think from talking to many of our customers, the part that never is really considered the most is the financial planning and projections. For example, if you may have a $1 million contract that comes in from a prime, but one thing you have to also realize is that widget that you're creating for them, well, now it requires additional layers of security to make sure that you protect that information that the prime has sent you. You may have also received a letter from your prime saying that you must be ITAR compliant, or you must be CMMC 2.0 compliant, or you must use COI on your correspondence, your emails, and your documentation to the prime. That's what I see a lot. The biggest one also is DFARS, right? You may also have received a letter from your prime or from the actual customer, from the DoD or from a federal agency auditing about CUI. They would say, okay, well, We have some concerns about how you are storing, encrypting, transmitting information related to the federal government. So we would like to audit your information. Either case, these are financial considerations. If you are going into the market and you want to be someone that is working directly with the prime contractors, it's best to understand what exactly you're going to offer these prime contractors. Because you have to remember, you are one of thousands of manufacturers that could manufacture the exact same widget or product. So you have to think to yourself, what do we do that some other manufacturer does not do? One way I would recommend is position your company as more of a defense contractor friendly organization, meaning that you have the proper compliance in place. For instance, CMMC 2.0, ITAR compliance, CUI, that you are currently and actively bidding on contracts, RFPs that you see inside of SAM, which I'll get into in the upcoming slides. You don't just want to go in and say, okay, now we want to work with the Department of Defense, or now we want to work with a prime contractors. There should be a strategy, right? There should be some kind of strategy in place. Additionally, don't wait for your prime contractor to send you a letter to tell you that you're not compliant or asking about your compliance. You want to be proactive in making sure that if you are working with a widget that you know or may be exported, or the end product is going to be exported, make sure you understand ITAR compliance, right? If you are working with files or information that would be considered national security, especially if we're talking about Department of Defense, make sure that your systems that you have in place are using proper encryption. Make sure that they are being stored correctly, and that doesn't mean to store them or in Gmail, which I see a lot of times, or store them in places where it's easy for anyone in your organization to see. Just to kind of think through exactly how you're going to make updates and changes to your organization to now fit for defense manufacturing. From a compliance perspective, right? So most of the manufacturers we talk to, they are used to hearing about ISO 9001 or ISO 27001. Those are more of your international standards. Those are great to have, but from a federal compliance and security perspective, those are not your biggest concern. Your biggest concern is things such as ITAR, which stands for International Traffic in Arms Regulations, your DFARS. So if you do any type of federal contracting, and especially as a defense contractor, DFARS is something that you should always consider and understand. That stands for Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, especially around security and compliance. CMMC, which is Security Maturity Model Certification, CMMC 2.0, working more so around the security and compliance controls, anything related to the federal government. These are parts that you should understand before you decide to work with federal agencies or with defense contractors, specifically your primes. Now, that's not to say that, sometimes you kind of, I guess you could call it an accidental business. Whereas one day you get that email or that phone call from that prime, and the next day, now all of a sudden you are a defense contractor. If that's the case, then you, again, have to take us one step back and make sure that your organization has all of the proper regulatory requirements to be a defense manufacturer. Even if only 5 or 10% of your business is that one prime contractor, doesn't matter. You have to look at your whole entire organization as now being considered as a defense contractor or defense manufacturer. One other concern that you may not have had before is that now, especially if we're talking about ITAR, the employees you have, depending on the contracts you have, you have to be considerate about who has access to what information based on if they are a U.S. citizen, a green card holder. This is something that if you're a commercial manufacturer, it's not really a necessary concern. But if you are a defense manufacturer, let's say, for instance, some of your team is in Germany, some of your team is in Turkey, some of your team is in South Korea, that would now be a consideration, right? It's to who would have access to what information. And from a compliance and a national security perspective, you now have to think about segregating that information so that if the persons are not U.S. citizens, green card holders, they may or may not be able to have access to that information. Now, there's an asterisk to that. There's things such as licenses, ITAR licenses, but that goes beyond this webinar. But I do want you to consider where your employees will be and exactly what type of access they will have, depending on, again, what type of contract you have. If we're talking about ITAR, then this would be something that would most definitely come up. The same is true with visitors to your facilities. I think out of every question that we receive is always around how are we going to protect our facility, and protect in the sense making sure that you know everyone that is coming in and out of your facility. If you are just a commercial manufacturer, it might be a simple visitor logbook, your name, who you're visiting, the time you're visiting, the date, and that's it. When it comes to visitors to your facility, and we're talking about ITAR, it's a matter of if they're a U.S. citizen, if they're not U.S. citizen. This is information that you have to log as well. It'll be part of your records management. And it's not just the team that is responsible for the contracts with the government, but everyone inside of your organization needs to understand how ITAR compliance works, how CMMC compliance works. For instance, access logs, right? Who has access to what, which is one of your controls. Everyone in your organization, from the receptionist on up, has to understand how ITAR, CMMC, CUI, how all this it works inside the organization. One example, and I give this time and time again, is that the most dangerous, I wouldn't say dangerous, but the persons that you should most definitely focus on is the janitor and the cleaning company that come into your facilities, right? Or especially if you are handling ITAR, right? Or do you have some kind of controls in place to make sure that they do not have access to sensitive areas? Do you have some kind of log of who came in, when they came in, what areas that they have access to? Do you have a security guard or systems in place to make sure that they don't go into areas that they should not? This is something I think a lot of organizations overlook. And this is also something that could come back and bite you if not done correctly. The location for your facilities. This comes up also time and time again. a lot of organizations outsource or have decided to have facilities outside the United States to control costs, which is fine. But you also have to consider now making sure that those facilities that are outside the United States, making sure that they are also just as secure as inside the United States. A perfect example is that if your locations are in, let's say, countries like Germany, Australia, etc., the information that is in those facilities, is only U.S. citizens allowed to review that information? How is those facilities segregated from your U.S. facilities? Or if not necessarily segregated, but how do you make sure that everyone inside of those facilities outside the U.S. still has access to the information they need without giving them anything that it requires U.S. citizen only or green card holder? Which goes directly into supply chain management. And a lot of times you may work with manufacturers outside of your own. For instance, maybe you work with China, maybe you work with Taiwan, maybe you work with Germany, Australia, etc., all part of your supply chain. Well, part of ITAR compliance is understanding who is directly part of your supply chain and making sure that there is some kind of record. Additionally, if we are talking about ITAR compliance and record keeping, you are just as responsible for your supply chain as the supply chain itself. Meaning, if your supply chain is also exporting out or outsourcing work to someone else, that information you need to know when we're talking about working with Department of Defense, the federal government. You are responsible for every part of your supply chain. Additionally, from your prime may have also contacted you to ask you who is part of your supply chain. Are you the one that is doing all of the work, or do you have other, or do you outsourced some of the work to other companies? And if so, can you please specify these companies, and can you also document to make sure that they are just as compliant as you are? Now, that's taking it to the extreme. You may not have to go because you don't know what happens in their organization, but you do have to have some kind of letter written up and ask your supply chain, do you do this, and have that ready and make sure that you have their signature. And it's also good to do an annual audit of that information. It's not just a one-time. And a lot of things that when it comes to compliance and security, it's not a one-time and done. It's a constant progress and a constant improvement on your compliance and on your security, which, again, looking back at financial management, this is something that you have to consider as well. If we are talking about ITAR compliance, some of the things that you should also consider, which you may not have to consider if we're talking about commercial work or commercial manufacturing, is that there are a list of countries that the United States has put on its embargoed list. And additionally, there are parties, which are companies and individuals, that are barred from doing business with, doing any business related to ITAR, specifically around the defense, importing, exporting of anything related to technical data or ITAR categories. So that being said, this is something that you also have to be aware as well. Don't just go in and assume that everyone you're dealing with is on the up and up and that they are compliant. It's always best to check than to be sorry later. Quality assurance, right? So if we're talking about a commercial organization or a commercial manufacturer, quality assurance, right? You have your ISO 90001, which is part of your quality assurance. If we are talking about defense manufacturing, think of it as the same levels that you would have with your ISO, but taking it more so from additional steps to audit your controls, to audit your systems, to audit your supply chain, to audit also your processes. I think, and what I see the most that gets manufacturers in trouble is not making sure that they are keeping proper records. For instance, if you are exporting a widget, let's say that that widget is being exported outside the country, well, have you registered DDTC so you are ITAR compliant? Do you have proper record keeping set up? Are you recording who is receiving that information or who is receiving that widget? Different steps like that are important when it comes to ITAR compliance. Additionally, if we're talking about national security and compliance, do you have some kind of log of who has access to information inside of your shop floors? A lot of times I see when I go into visits to manufacturer plants, it's an open shop floor. Anyone from the outside can just go directly into the shop floor. No visitor, no type of security or visitor log or receptionist. If you plan on being a defense contractor, this is something that you now have to consider. So next up, so now you say, okay, fine and good, we're going to work on these things. What are the next steps? Well, the next steps to becoming a defense manufacturer, and the big one, is registering in SAM.gov. When I'm talking to customers, one of the things I notice is that they are not registered in SAM.gov. Now, do you have to be registered in SAM.gov? Not necessarily. If you plan on just working with, say, a prime contractor and creating the widget for them and sending the widget back to them, that's pretty much the scope of your work. You don't necessarily have to be registered in SAM because they are the ones that are doing business directly with the government. If you have part of your plan to become a defense manufacturer, you will have to be listed in SAM.gov. Once you are listed in SAM.gov, you will then get your cage number or your cage code, and that's how you're going to be tracked throughout your whole entire lifespan for the organization of when you're bidding on RFPs, when you're working with prime contractors. They may ask you what's your cage code. That's how they can see what your past performance is, what kind of contracts you bid on. These things are very, very important. Another step that I think is important is making sure that your organization has a profile in dynamic small business search. This basically where you show off what your company does. It has all of your codes, your product codes that you create. So for instance, if you are a fabricator, you can put in there that this is what we do. We do fabrication. So if the government or prime contractors are looking for someone that does fabrication, now you're in there, right? So some companies, they say to me, well, we have a website. Well, a website is not good enough when it comes time to being a defense manufacturer. A website is great if you are a commercial manufacturer, right? It showcases your products, what you can do, but you have to take things to the next level when we're talking about defense manufacturing. And one way is basically using the yellow book of the defense and the federal contracting world, which would be your dynamic small business search profile. So that's the conclusion. So there's a few things we didn't discuss, right? It kept things very high level. One thing that we would have to consider, or that you should consider as well, is are you going to be working on classified versus unclassified, which there are additional processes and steps. And I'll do a webinar in the future on this because it's a very complex topic. Another part to consider is your strategic planning. That's where you should really spend a lot of your time and effort into planning. One thing that I see over and time again is the importance of relationship building. You could start a defense manufacturing organization tomorrow, but the most important part is making sure that you have relationships. That's what's going to open a lot of doors for you as a new defense manufacturer. Whether you're creating one little widget, or if you have a whole entire catalog of widgets, creating those relationships with the prime contractors and creating relationships with the agencies, right? Showcasing in your brochure. That's what helps you get into many doors and get into many contracts. As we say, if you're replying to the RFP, it's normally already too late. You should be having relationships before the RFP has been written, and preferably you should be the one helping them write the RFP. Additionally, considering quality management and supply chain security is what we also talked about. I can't stress this enough. Know who your supply chain is, part of your supply chain, making sure that they are just as compliant as you are. Because of the many laws that have passed now, you are just as responsible as they are. So if they have a breach of your information, then you are just as responsible as they are. Okay. With that, let's go to the next slide to discuss our services. If you have any questions around becoming a defense manufacturer, and obviously we talked on very high level topics, but if you have topics specific to your organization, you need help and assistance from everything from registration all the way down to data protection and making sure that your organization is compliant, please reach out to us. We help over 500 manufacturers become either defense manufacturers, or you're already a defense manufacturer and you need assistance with compliance and security. We assist you on all of those levels. And of course, you can reach out to us on our website. Just click on the Contact Us. You can either schedule an appointment directly on our website with us, or you can just send us a message and myself or my staff will answer you normally within 24 hours. I hope this webinar has been useful and will help you as you navigate the roads to becoming a defense manufacturer. If you are already a defense manufacturer, I hope this has shed some light into the security and the compliance side of being a defense manufacturer. Thank you and have a great day.